Welcome to another episode of No Reading Required Book Club.
Yay!
Yay! This is week 2 of our new book, which is this one here, Hinds Feet on High Places. Last week we read chapters 1, 2, and 3, and chapters 1, 2, and 3 were introducing us to our main character, Much Afraid, from the Valley of Humiliation. What's the name of her town? Something about fear and trembling? No, that's not quite right.
I thought it was just trembling.
City of Trembling, Town of Trembling.
I don't remember.
And then she is a servant of the shepherd, and in a conversation with the shepherd, she said she longed to go to the high places. The kingdom of love is on the high places. The shepherd comes and goes easily. He has hinds feet, which is a type of deer, and Much Afraid is got feet that are crippled. And we had a whole conversation about how this book was written 1970. So there's language that I feel, when I first read it like 20 years ago, I loved everything about the book. I couldn't find anything I disliked, but this time reading it back, my sensitivities about certain things have changed.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to remember it's a spiritual metaphor. And so she feels like she physically cannot go to the high places, and so the shepherd is going to help her develop hinds feet. That's the piece of, so that she can leap on the these on the high places, which is metaphorically the picture is like you have grown to the place where these are things that you can dance among because you have gone through the journey. So Much Afraid is invited to go out on this adventure. She had some setbacks. Some family members from the family of fear tried to hold her back, but we ended with its sunrise, and that's where we picked up our chapter. Chapter 4, starting for the high places. What do you remember of this chapter?
She meets her companions.
Oh, this is a big one. Right before they meet the companions, there's a whole conversation about wildflowers.
Yes. There was some
Just
things.
move this out of the way.
There were some things that I found interesting. I have a hard time. I don't want to be critical.
But you're about to be critical.
But I'm about to be critical. By the way, we have lemonade. Liz lovingly made us some lemonade for this.
Well, it doesn't feel like a tea thing. When we were doing Advent and when we were doing Lent, we had tea every morning.
Yeah.
I felt lemonade would be a more summertime vibe.
So there's this conversation that happens. So first off, they start going through the wildflowers, and it's described as a carpet of wildflowers of different colors. And there's this conversation of Much Afraid talks about how the wildflowers seem to burst with love and joy and color, yet no one witnesses it. It happens in secret, and only the animals witness it and just trample it all to death. Which was this interesting idea of this love blooms in secret. Which I thought was, I didn't mind that part.
Okay,
that was fine.
So I even highlighted, I know you hate writing in books, but I underlined a thing about that conversation. The look the shepherd turned on her was very beautiful. Nothing my father and I have made is ever wasted. The little flowers have wonderful lessons to teach. They each offer themselves sweetly and confidently and willingly, even as if it seems no one appreciates them, just as though they sang a joyous little song to themselves. That is so happy to love, even though one is not loved in return. Nothing my father and I made is ever wasted. I think that's the piece that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And there are times where I read it somewhere else in a book this week. It was somebody promoting a book about mission and being the Jesus people, and it's just the beauty of, I'm gonna get the quote wrong. It was it is at its best when it's hundreds and thousands of nameless, faceless, just adding their bucket to the tide of God's love.
So, if nothing that the shepherd and his father has ever created has been wasted, does that mean we need to stop slapping mosquitoes?
And
stepping on spiders?
Well, okay, so the same person who posted this quote on Facebook also posted one about he was interviewing a naturalist whose research in biology was on beetles, and the the quote back was, "What have you learned?" And there's so many hundreds and thousands of beautiful different types of beetles. God really must love beetles.
So the part
I'm okay with killing ticks.
So the part that came in after that, where I was like, "Oh, I have a problem with this," was when she starts admiring the stream and the waters. So they cross over this. They don't explain how big it is, but they cross over this
river,
fair-sized rushing water of some form, a river. They don't explain how wide it is. They don't talk about how they get across it. They cross it.
Okay.
And she admires the sound of the river, which I have done multiple times. I have no problems with admiring the sound of the river. It's when the author starts describing the song of the river and she starts to understand the language of the river that I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm starting to take issue.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because that's not where I took issue with the authors. So I also would like to double check that we are actually live, because this is the second week where
it just says offline for both, but I don't have a phone with me because I forgot to grab mine, so I can't check.
I could go get one.
I mean, I could check this way.
Okay, this is getting more technical than I wanted, because I don't want sound feedback and my... Nope.
Don't worry, we're not going to have sound feedback. Oops, that's not the one I wanted. I wanted this one.
Okay.
Anyway, continue.
So, your issue is with the song. I thought it was very interesting that as she travels with the shepherd, her understanding of the language of things changes. She could not understand the water, and then she could, because she was with Jesus. Well, with the shepherd. Yeah.
So I didn't have an issue. I was fine with it right up until the author. Hey, look, you're live now. Still says day 8 of Holy Week again.
Even though we changed it. I would like to play around with this before next week to get the dates correct.
I would like to destroy Restream and rebuild it from scratch so that it works properly. But anyway.
Is there a better system?
No, not that I know of.
Okay.
It just doesn't integrate very well with OBS, even though it's designed specifically to integrate with OBS. But anyway.
Okay, so the song, full confession, this is not the only book that has poetry written in. It seems to be authors of that time period. C.S. Lewis put poetry in some of his writings. Tolkien has poetry in his writings. There's a couple other authors from that time period that just break out in poem in the middle of their thing. I always skip the poems.
Me too.
And it's probably something really good. There's often beauty in them, but I skipped them. Okay, so the water song is, "Come, oh come, let us away, lower, lower every day. Oh, what joy it is to race down to find the lowest place. This is the dearest law we know. It is happy to go low. Sweet urge and sweetest will, let us go lower still. Hear the summons night and day, calling us to come away. From heights we leap and flow to the valleys below, always answering to the call to lowest place of all. Sweetest urge and sweetest pain, to go low and rise again."
Yeah.
Okay, so what is your issue with the poem?
Just the fact that it was written.
Okay.
I take issue with the idea that we can know at all what nature is saying to us.
But the nature isn't nature.
I recognize that. But I still take it very literally. What I do like is the part that's after that, which is when Much Afraid asks the shepherd, why would something that gets to the highest place want to go low? And he explains how once we get there, we're welcome there, and then we can find the humility to continue going down into the lowest places and go back up again and help other people get back up again in that.
Yeah. So we are going to see the river again near the end of the book. It's interesting. I will say, like, up until chapter 6. Chapter 6 is the first chapter. I'm like, I read this book. I do not remember this. I think it's a beautiful thing. She's on a journey up while the water is coming down. Mm-hmm. And for her, who's striving to be up, cannot understand the water wanting to go down. You just don't like it because it's a poem.
I don't like it because I don't think we have any idea what nature is actually saying to us.
But it's not nature. It's an allegory.
I understand, but I still, it's the same idea as when people have this concept of, well, if we just understood better, we could know what the animals are saying to us. I don't think we can ever know what the animals are saying to us.
Okay, but I don't think she's saying every river is singing the song. I think she's trying to say this water comes from the kingdom of love, and it's what the water had. The living water that is going to the driest, lowest places that need it the most. Okay. I don't know why I'm so worked up that you disagree with it. Because I have places where I disagree with the otter. Okay. After the water, after the flowers, she meets her companions. Who are her twins?
Who are, I believe there's Sorrow and Suffering.
Sorrow and Suffering.
And I find it very interesting. This is what I like. This was I found very interesting. So this was the whole thing about the naming convention that I struggled with when we talked about last week. Is she says, I would not have picked these two. Can't you pick somebody else? And the shepherd asks, well, who would you pick? And she says, I would pick Peace and Hope, I believe.
I thought it was Peace and Joy.
Peace and Joy. Yes, Peace and Joy. I would have picked Peace and Joy. And the shepherd then rebukes her slightly and says, but I thought you said you
Joy and peace.
Yeah.
Couldn't you have given me joy and peace to go, to strengthen me and encourage me, to help me on the difficult way? I never thought you would do... I liked this, honesty. I never thought you would do this to me. And she burst into tears.
She feels her emotions deeply.
She feels her Poor Much Afraid. Her cheeks blanched as she began to tremble head to toe. She felt so faint that she clung to the shepherd for support. I can't go with them!
And she is very... To give you an idea of why, they are very tall, very stoic, silent, she finds them very foreboding. They're very, she's always been afraid of these two. Yeah,
and they don't speak. She asks, are they dumb? No, they are not dumb, the shepherd says quietly. But they speak a new language, Much Afraid, a dialect of the mountain which you have not yet learned. But as you travel with them, little by little, you will learn to understand their words. I also put an exclamation mark, which is more normally something I liked. So the page before this, it says, yes, certainly, when the flower of love is ready to bloom in your heart, you will be loved in return. I had issues with this one. You will be loved in return and will receive a new name. No problem with the new name concept, but if this is an allegory...
we are already loved.
We are already loved. And there are a few places where I am in Christianity, where I am in my journey of faith, there are times where I come back to something that I think the other was talking something about her own journey, and it doesn't match mine.
Right.
But it's more than it doesn't match mine. That was something it's almost you can't be loved unless you do this thing. And God is not opposed to effort, but we do not earn his love. He gives it freely. Yeah. The moment the seed of love is planted, we are loved. We just might not perceive it fully. Anyway, I had issues with that. There was an exclamation mark. So she bursts into tears with her new companions.
And then he asks if she trusts him, and she ultimately decides that yes, she trusts him. She remembers that she did say she would trust him, and she reluctantly accepts her two guides and goes with them. And right from the start, he says, they will be your companions. They will help you through your struggles, and they will lift you up as you need it. They will hold your hand and carry you through the places that are a struggle. And she decides right away she's not going to hold their hands. She can't do that. And within a paragraph, she's holding their hands because the terrain is so treacherous that she needs their strength, their support, just to be able to climb this mountain.
Well, we were hiking last weekend, and there's more than one place where you're like, can I give you a hand? Can I support you on this? I'm like, it's too far of like an angle. Like if you were, I need something to steady me here. And there were times I did reach out for you. There's times I reached out for trees. So I totally.
So even though she doesn't want to approach them or be with them, she reaches out to them and holds their hands and gets the support she needs from the two of them to make the trek.
Yeah, and there is like, this isn't the journey of salvation. We had a conversation because in an allegory, there's a lot of things that are going to feel similar to a story like Pilgrim's Progress, but this is unique because she's already in the service of the shepherd. This is more her going through. I don't want to get into theological language, but it is this life's journey that refines her. It's the Jesus people or God's people, spiritual people who are already on this journey, who are being shapened to be more loving, to be more compassionate. And often we do have to go on these journeys through sorrow to experience and have that compassion for someone else.
It's our maturing in Christ.
Yes. So chapter 2, she meets someone. And there's a pause in the beginning of the chapter where it kind of goes back to the Valley of Humiliation.
Is that 24 hours earlier that you see in a TV show or something?
And the family of Fearing are furious that Much Afraid is left. They didn't care for her when she was there, but now that she's gone, it's a big deal, and she's the most important person. They need to get her back. And more than once it says things along the line of make her a servant, make her a slave when she gets back. They feel that the shepherd has robbed them and flinched her from them. And it becomes an entire, like, community-wide thing. Relatives and family beyond the Fearing family want to bring her back. And so they choose Pride, who does not appear overpowering, to go and seduce her and bring her back because he is handsome, he's alluring, if anybody can do it. And he is too prideful to fail in his mission.
Yes.
And I think it's interesting, like, just that, I don't know if it's this chapter or the previous chapter where the shepherd says, be careful, like, oh, that was one of them. Why can't you just carry me to the high places?
Yeah, that was an interesting conversation because...
And he's like, physically, I can. I could just take you to the top. But you would not be ready for it. You would not be able to survive there. You wouldn't be prepared to go into the kingdom of love because you haven't gone through it yourself. You've been... And...
You would be stuck on the outside. And being stuck on the outside would mean that all of the enemies that you have could still reach you potentially, so you would never be actually safe from them.
Yeah, and so that was almost like a foreshadowing to Pride has made it up the mountain by a different route, a less treacherous route to be ahead of them. It also makes me think, like, I'm not great at video games, but I do like playing, and having come back from Japan in 2005, so we're going back a few years, the system was still an Xbox, and I had never finished Halo. I could only ever complete, like, the first two, maybe 3 levels. And so my friend and I spent the whole night playing. I think we even played it on medium, maybe hard. I don't know. He's good. I am not. And I was there. The game got played. I just spent most of the game respawning and just, like, he carried the whole game.
Yeah.
There was one time where he had died near the end, and he's like, just hide in a corner and shoot everything until I respawn. Do not die. That was my one mission. Do not die until I can come and rescue you. And, like, I shot things. I did not help. And so if I was to pick up the game today, this is the tie-in. I could not play that game. I'd go back to the beginning, and even though I've finished it, he carried me the whole way.
You would still do okay on levels 1 or 2 and then have to be carried the rest of the way, or finally figure it out for yourself.
Yeah. Okay.
We could play together, because I also struggle through it. We could struggle together!
Yay! High five! Interesting chapter. the idea that she stops, why did she listen to Pride? Once Pride had his hand on her, it was hard to let go. There were things he said that were alluring, that were her own questions and concerns, but he voiced them in a different way that made her want to doubt and mistrust. Very alluring. And she's honest with him, and like, I'm seeking the kingdom of love. Seeking the desires of your heart. And now, much afraid, have a little pride. Ask yourself honestly, are you not so ugly and disformed that nobody in the valley loves you? What a brutal truth. Then how much less will you be welcomed in the kingdom of love, where they say nothing is blemished. There's nothing but unblemished beauty and perfection. Can you really expect to find what you're seeking? No, I tell you again, that you will find yourself and know yourself. Then be honest and at least give it up. Turn back before it's too late. So pride, I've had some people ask me, like, why is pride a sin? Why is pride a sin? Because I'm proud of my daughter's achievements. I'm proud of making it to this place. And I think, much like the word love or some other words in language, we have a couple different nuances that come out of this word. Mm-hmm. And pride in this case is that, like, arrogance of, I don't need help, or I am better than you, or that pride of, I have to save face in every situation, so lying to yourself and lying to others. The word have a little pride. Mm-hmm. You're so ugly, we don't even like you, why would they like you? Give up, because you're just embarrassing. You're embarrassing yourself and you're embarrassing us. That level of pride, I think, is where the sin is. The pride of even just, I am an island. I don't need anyone else. So I don't need to listen to you or learn from you. I don't need to have empathy for you. Mm-hmm. All of that, I think, is wrapped into this type of pride.
Right.
So if I was to write it again now, just because language changes over the years, I probably would use the word arrogance.
Yeah.
What word would you use? Would you keep it pride? Would you change it to arrogance? Would you use a different word?
Yeah, that is an interesting question, because I kind of feel like it's almost a mix of the two, because it's not purely arrogance, because we wouldn't be arrogant in our blemishes or in our disfigurement.
But have pride in yourself. Like there's
But to be so self-absorbed that is the only thing you see, and therefore it colors how you look at everything.
So how does she get out of this situation?
Unfortunately.
Oh, I didn't think you...
I stopped just before that.
Okay.
That is exactly where I was reading I was trying to finish up this morning, and unfortunately I got stuck in a bunch of meetings at work. So my plan of finishing up the last chapter, basically,
before we go
live, chapter 6, and then the last little tiny bit of chapter 5 this morning before we go live, didn't happen because I was in a meeting followed by a meeting followed by a meeting, and then we were setting up here. So
okay. So how do you think Much Afraid should get out of pride's clutches?
I would think that her companion's sorrow and suffering would help, but I don't know how sorrow and suffering would help.
Okay.
But because they say right in the beginning of the chapter that not only did they help her scale the difficult parts of the trek, but they also helped save her from her enemies, makes me feel like they were part of the solution.
So, it's right after that speech from Pride, Much Afraid remembers that she pledged...
I got to hear.
Yeah. She remembers the shepherd says, I pledge myself to bring you to the high places. And before Pride could realize it, Much Afraid uttered a desperate cry for help. Come to me, shepherd. Come quickly. Make no tarry, O my lord. Can definitely tell somebody read and lived in the King James, because it was a time period where that was really one of the only translations, the shepherd shows up. Pride runs away. And then there's a conversation. Why did you let pride come up and take your hand? If you had been holding the hands of your two helpers, it would have never happened. For the first time, much afraid of her own free will, held out both hands to her two companions, and they grasped her strongly. But never before had their hold upon her been so painful or so bitter. She learned in this way the first important lesson on her journey upward. If one stops to parley with pride and listens to his poisonous suggestions, sorrow is unspeakably more unbearable, and the anguish of the heart is bitter. Now, I think that... I thought it happened here. No, it happens in this next chapter. Okay, so this next chapter, Detour Through the Desert, you have not read. So let me tell you about it. They're going along the path. And she wants to go up, and the path dips down. And the more it dips down, she can see an expansive desert, some pyramids, and the expanse of the desert, and she can't believe it. So she tries to look for some other ways, and her companions are like, "Nope, this way." And she's like, "But I want to go up." And,
that sounds familiar.
I can't go down there. He can never mean that. Never. He called me up to the high places. This is an absolute contradiction of all that he promised. And I think all of us at some point in our lives have a moment where we're like, I need to go this way. God promised that this way. Why am I going over here?
Yeah.
And the chapter is going to talk about, like, Abraham had the detour in the desert. Joseph had a detour in the desert. The children of Israel promised land, but they spend time in the desert. Jesus, it's not mentioned in this, but even like Jesus went out into the wilderness. John the Baptist out in the wilderness. There's something about those desert detours. And
even Jesus' parents disappeared off into the desert for a couple of years.
Yeah, right after his birth.
Yeah.
So she calls out to the master. He says, "No, this is the way I want you to go." And there's a lot in this chapter where... okay, before we get to the desert, they travel together. The shepherd stays with her. I think the illusion that the shepherd isn't always there, that she has to call on him, I was really troubled about it. It's the one piece of the allegory I'm like, the shepherd is always with us. Or the Holy Spirit, like however you want to put that language. And yet I do recognize there are times where we're walking and we do need to call out and be like, I'm in a dire straits. What's going on? I am in the pit of despair. And so the path was, they reached the desert surprisingly quickly, because although the path was very steep indeed, much afraid was leaning on the shepherd and did not feel her weakness at all. I think that's one of the most beautiful sentences in this chapter. And so they stay here for a couple days. There's like some huts, there's some pyramids, and each day the shepherd takes her into a different room. And all of them have some things in common. It's grain being ground down, it's flax being sifted and prepared, it's dill, and I forget the other spice. There's a lot of scripture actually quoted. I appreciate that when it's actual scripture and not just poetry that the author wrote, there is a bracket of the original scripture text. So, dill is not threshed bread corn. So that's from Isaiah 28. There's some Jeremiah in here as well. So there's the making of wheat being threshed and pounded down and ground down. There is the illustration of dill being threshed, how everything is threshed differently to get for different purposes. And then the last one is a gold room, so there's smelting of taking out the impurities of gold and silver. And then there is a potter's wheel, a room of the potter's wheel. So she travels through these different things. And right before one of her last days in the desert, on the last morning she was walking near the tents, and she found this like little golden flower. and she's watching it and realizes that there is the water barrel there, and a little drop comes out, and it's growing, and she speaks to the flower. Behold, my name is acceptance with joy, and it's the where I am, and still there's an author that my mom read a number of years ago, and her first book is Bloom Where You're Planted. And I think that's the piece of the journey that Much Afraid's in, is my life might not be exactly how I want it, but God is using this to refine me, bloom where I'm planted. And that is a tension, I think, in the Christian journey of loving where I am, learning to accept with joy the place that I am in now, with all of its goods and challenges, and longing for the full life. I think the U2 song, I still haven't found what I'm looking for, is an example of that. Like that, having joy and still longing for joy, or having Christ and still longing for more.
Mm-hmm.
And there is that tension. Bloom where you're planted, acceptance with joy, and that's where we leave her in the desert, pondering the name, acceptance with joy. Oh, there is. I don't know where it happened. It might have been in the Pride chapter, and it might have been in the Desert chapter. It might be right before this one's an important one because it's going to come back. I think it's right when she decides to go down to the desert. The shepherd has her make a little altar, and she puts her will almost on the altar, and it burns up, and what's left is this little pebble that she's told to keep this moment. And I think it is important to keep in your spiritual faith when there is places of significance. Sometimes it's a commitment. I will commit to pray for a country, and you put a star on a map. But then having some way of holding on to, I made this commitment because it matters. But what other tokens of faith? Some people write in their journals, this happened on this day and I agreed this, or I surrendered to God this issue, and I said I will trust you.
Your mom's way is by putting little tiny bits of scripture all over the house.
Yeah, that's my mom. For a long time, in my early college years, a lot of my deep spiritual moments, these private moments, these wildflower moments, if I use the illustration of moments that nobody else but God and me know about, I would clip a leaf off a branch and put it into whatever book I was reading that day, or my journal. So it still happens. I'll open a book I haven't read since college, and out will fall a leaf. I'm like, well, that was significant to me at one time. I wish I had left myself more of a knowledge of what this victory was, or what this commitment was, or what the significance of this specific leaf was.
It reminds me of that video you were watching yesterday. They were talking about before we had written language, there was an invading army that was coming up on this people group, and the people group sent them a message by courier. And
with no written language.
Yeah, with no written language. It was just a box, and inside the box was 5 items. I know there was an arrow, a fish, a feather. Anyways.
Okay, there was a bird, a rat, and a frog, and there were 5 arrows. And the receiving nation took it to mean you can't fly away from us, you can't scurry under, you can't swim against. I forget what the frog was. Our arrows are going to fly on you. And so they retreated.
It's now been determined that it might have actually been a note of surrender of, you've already conquered us by air, by sea, and by land. We've laid down our arms or something like that. You can. So it's this idea of, written language gives a bit more context when all you have is a visual representation of a thought. Yeah. You can sometimes lose that pretty easily.
And sometimes you have, I remember, and I saying yes to dying to self like a kernel of corn, and saying yes to the mission field. And we were given a piece of corn, dried planting corn. And I kept it for years. And I think it got lost in a move because somebody was helping me pack and wondered why there was this weird thing in my jewelry box. But that, like, having sometimes those significant pieces. I was at a very significant spring encounter last year, and the speaker had something related to being all in. And there was a picture and a story, and it mattered in that moment of putting your last poker chip in. It fit with the sermon. So she gave us all dollar store poker chips. And I carried mine in my pocket for like months afterwards.
I remember that because I had to fish them out of your pocket every once in a while when I was doing laundry.
I appreciate you so much. So, that's something to ponder is what are the places in your life where you have made a commitment, a yes to Jesus, maybe a surrendering of life, maybe a killing of a piece of you that was harmful to you, maybe letting go of a lie or unforgiveness, maybe it was a decision to stop a habit or
start a good habit.
Well, yeah, start like that piece of I want to go this way, but I will go that way. Because that was hers. I want to go up. You want me to go this way. And so she has a stone that she now has in a little pouch that she's carrying with her. So it's her first stone. I think that's a good place to end.
Next week, we're back on Tuesday.
We will be reading chapters 7, 8, and 9, which are the shores of loneliness on the old sea wall and great
precipice injury. Yeah.
Yep.
So, yeah, we will be back next Tuesday at noon.
To talk about this, I took the book cover off.
To talk about this book.
This book. This one, right here.
All right. Have a great rest of your lunch and rest of your week.
And we'll see you next Tuesday.
All right. Bye.
Bye, friends.